If you're suing the state, what is it? It's already said right here. You can't. You lose all protection. You cannot. And it's in the international treaty law. You have a right to self-exile. You have a right to self-determination. You don't have a right. Original Declaration of Maryland. If you got no redress, it's time to do what? Form a new government. Any of the examples I said in history, as I know people get upset about this, Ray, but any examples I said in history are still valid. And this is what the international community realizes. They keep telling you, they do it right. Jeroboam and the 10 tribes left. You know, some of the people went back from Babylon to Jerusalem, and Israel left Egypt. They didn't go to war either. They got pursued. No, allegedly, I've heard it. The point is that according to what that says, these people didn't pick up a sword, and they didn't keep complaining anymore. They left. There again, like I said, doesn't necessarily mean you got to leave the dirt. With Jeroboam and Rehoboam and the 10 tribes, they didn't leave the dirt. They stayed where they were. They just formed a different state. Same thing on this document too down here, by the way. No alien may interfere either directly or indirectly with the politics of the country in which he happens to be, or claim any enjoyment of any rights or assertions of any other rights, such rights other than those provided for nationals by the Constitution and the laws. So nationals are under the Constitution, meaning under. Okay, aliens shall be obliged to respect the political, social, and economic regime prevailing in the state in which they reside, and to observe and obey the law and provisions enforced therein, and to submit to the jurisdiction, government authorities and of its courts of justice. Now, this is saying that aliens have the same rights as nationals, which is to submit to the jurisdiction and decision of the governmental authorities. Period. Nationals have to submit. They don't have any political rights. They have civil rights, and those rights are granted. Those rights can be taken away. And I'll show that in a different document when we get to the notes on the state of Virginia. Go down to page number 17. I'm going to read this. Basically what these people did, this is talking about history. They got upset one day and they said, we're tired of being oppressed, so what this means, we have to take responsibility for all these services that the king is supplying. Okay, all these rules of protection, courts of mediation, and those schools of education, we want to set them up because we want to protect our rights, where the previous is not doing so. We want to educate our children the way we think instead of the way they think. Because I guarantee you, when somebody sets up something, they pass on the knowledge unto the posterity of those things in which they're going to rule, i.e. the posterity today. By the way, Ray, so I have some documents on it to show international treaties that the U.S. started signing. You know, where it says in Article 6 that the U.S. had the authority to sign international treaties. Back then, in the 1880s and 1890s, and I'm sorry, 1780s, 1790s. The treaties I found literally said the United States of America, or the United States of North America, or the United States, whichever the treaties were, depending on the period of time. Because after 1789, it was the United States that had the right to sign the treaties, not the United States of America. But it also uses the language that says their possessions and their subjects. I'll never forget rereading that. I think it was in the first treaty I read with the King of Morocco, and I was sitting there going, well, wait a minute, who are these U.S. subjects? They changed the word to citizen. You know, then they got into that stupid argument about capital C or little c. The word citizen is still a subject under someone else's constitution because you failed to come out and do your own compact. Anyway, what it says here, so as I was explaining to the gentleman outside, if you're not a party to the contract, i.e. the Constitution, or a signatory to the contract, you're known as what? A wild deer, an antelope, and they like to have those things because they like to eat them. This was an interview with Arthur, by the way. They give license to those who like to go out and suck on them. We know they're called the police, or they're called the attorneys, or they're called whatever, until you realize that you are in that state as a refugee, just like the deer or the antelope. Then the secured party creditor, that's the SPC right there, that last sentence, secured party creditor standing has no bearing. That's why redemption does not work 100%. Redemption cannot work 100% because the way off the plantation, the country, the state, the county, was more aptly put the way divine law works. Divine law works under contract law, and when you're given a presentment without standing, you have no standing to state a claim for which relief can be granted. And if you're a refugee under this law, refugee meaning you're not signatory, you have no standing other than the jurisdiction of the state that you're found in. And if you cannot state otherwise that you belong to something else, i.e. the alliance or the dominion, like I am, and prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt, then you're lost. Not in the sense of the way they're treating you, because you ain't ever lost to them. You're bound to them, just like the deer. They have a license to hunt, and they're going to eat it out until there's nothing but bones and dust. So if you will go into the Encyclopedia Britannica under international organizations, you get an idea of what it is. Now they exercise, and what I mean by they, those who are willing to self-govern are exercising power. You know, people who are signatory to the Charter of the United Nations, otherwise known as the OUN, That's why it's an organization. It's the OUN, not just the UN. They dropped off the O because they wanted you to think it was a government, but it's nothing more than an organization, an IGO. There's other ones like NATO. And they have a lot of power. That's because they're willing to put up value and take responsibility for that power to be exercised. If you're not going to put up something to support the exercise, whether it's the alliance or something else, then they'll always assume that you belong to them or whoever finds you. So the point about how this works with the alliance, under international recognition, according to these encyclopedias, there was about 10 of these IGOs in 1850, and today there's about 2,500 of them. Now, they've tried to take some of the power away from these organizations by making them non-governmental or NGOs, which means you're under the control of the mother organization called the OUN. And the fact is, there's a lot of people who are falling for that, who want to have a voice to speak. The point is with NGOs, is you don't have to fall for it. You can actually become a part of a supranational intergovernmental organization. Now, the medium word here is supranational intergovernmental. What controls that? Well, you draw up the contract or the compact, you sign it, you say what you're going to do to support it, your pledge. That's what the founders did. They were the ones that built the ships, the boats, and they actually paid the Continental Army, which was a mercenary army, who did not pledge, by the way, which is the reason they had no right to the compact. As a matter of fact, they all revolted when they didn't get paid, which tells me that they didn't pledge. If they'd have pledged their life, their liberty, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, then they wouldn't have been worried about whether or not they got paid, because they would have been the ones paying to have their freedom. A contract is called a charter or constitution or whatever you want to call it, but unless you've got it, you can't treat with them an authority because someone else is always going to claim you. Does that make sense, Ray?
Yeah.
No, okay. Exactly.